Hello and welcome to the second session of our two-part series on engaging youth and academia with data for the future. Today, we will take an in-depth look at the recent Sustainable Development Goals 2024, a report released last month by the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, or UN DESA for short, that tracks global progress towards the SDGs. As you know, we need to reach these 17 goals by 2030, so the clock is ticking. My name is John Bartlett, and I will be moderating today from Jordan. And thank you for joining us from your part of the world. Of course, we're very glad that you can be here. This event is hosted by UN DESA, and the UN Academic Impact is a way to showcase the key messages and dataset of this report for an audience of students, researchers, and other academics. We would also like to thank the UN Peace and Development Trust Fund for making today's event possible. Over the next 75 minutes, we will delve deep into this data, which details the challenges the world is facing in delivering the SDGs based on the latest data and estimates from the UN DESA Statistics Division. In a moment, our colleagues will show which areas face the most setbacks and which goals have seen some tangible progress. Exploring data for the future is very timely, of course, as the UN is set to host the Once-in-a-Generation Summit of the Future in September this year, where world leaders will demonstrate that international cooperation can effectively achieve agreed goals and tackle emerging threats and opportunities. But before we dive into our discussion, here is some quick housekeeping. Multilingual captions are available in Zoom. Just click on the captioning icon at the bottom of your screens and select the language you'd like. Please help spread the word on what you hear today on social media using the hashtag SDGs or SDGs. Today's Global Policy Dialogue will feature an extra long question and answer session, and we're counting on your contributions. We'll be taking questions via the online Slido platform, where you can type your own question and vote up other people's. We will also have some audience polls for you. So just go to slido.com, that's slido.com/SDGs, or go to slido.com and insert the hashtag SDGs. So let's try Slido right now. To kick things off with a quick poll for you, our audience, on this question. From where are you joining us today? The options we have, I can see some of you are already voting, are Africa, Asia and the Pacific, Europe, Latin America and the Caribbean, North America, Western Asia, or somewhere else. I'll give you a minute to vote and get familiar with Slido. Again, just go to slido, slido.com, and use the hashtag SDGs to vote. While you're voting, I'm very pleased to introduce Małgorzata Juszczak, Program Manager for the UN Academic Impact, to deliver some welcoming remarks. So over to you, Małgorzata.
Thank you, John. Hello again. Welcome to all who joined us yesterday for a session on the World Population Prospects Report. Also, warm greetings to all the new participants. For the newcomers, let me introduce myself. My name is Małgorzata Juszczak. I am Program Manager for the United Nations Academic Impact, an initiative which engages institutions of higher education with the UN to support its mandates, goals, and principles, including Sustainable Development Goals. Our network of over 1,600 member institutions in more than 150 countries is actively developing innovative solutions to address global challenges. It's a great honor to partner with the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs for the Global Policy Dialogue series. During yesterday's briefing, we have reviewed global population trends, which are a crucial element for distribution of resources to implement SDGs. Today, the dialogue will focus on the 2024 Sustainable Development Goals report released last June, which, as John mentioned, is very timely considering the upcoming Summit for the Future taking place in UN headquarters in September, and it is set to turbocharge the implementation of SDGs. As you may know, in 2015, world leaders adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its 17 goals, which are the blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. The current 2024 report warns that with just 6 years left to the 2030 deadline, the progress falls short to meeting the targets. The report documents that increasing global inequalities, war upending millions of lives, and environmental crisis derail the achievement of SDGs. In fact, only 17 of the SDG targets are on track, nearly half show minimal or moderate progress, and 1/3 is stalling or even regressing. But the report also highlights examples of success that we can build upon, such as reduction in child mortality and HIV infections, such as improvements in access to clean water, sanitation, and mobile broadband, advancements in renewable energy, and gender parity in school completion for most of the regions. Nonetheless, there is still much work to be done, and this is where your role as academics and students becomes especially critical. The research you conduct, the knowledge you acquire, and the community projects you lead are the building blocks of the SDGs. Whether it's through groundbreaking studies that influence policy, classroom discussions that spark new ideas, or local initiatives that bring about real change, each one of us plays a crucial role in shaping a sustainable future for all. The ideas and solutions that emerge from the halls of your academic institutions will drive progress and bridge the gap between the SDG goals and the real-world outcomes that we hope to achieve. Thank you all for joining United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs and the Academic Impact Initiative as we continue this important discussion together. Over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Malgorzata, for that kind welcome and overview of what we can expect today from our discussion. Now, let's take a look at how you voted in our Slido poll. It's fantastic to see so many of you joining from different parts of the world. It looks like at the moment, the majority from Asia and the Pacific and Europe, but also many from North America, Latin America, and the Caribbean. So thank you very much for voting. I hope Slido makes sense to you, and thank you for participating in the poll. Remember, you can ask your questions for our speakers there on the Slido platform. Before we get to them though, we do have a short video explaining the 2024 SDG report as a moment of choice and consequence. Let's have a look at that video, so please roll that tape.
The Sustainable Development Goals Report 2024, a moment of choice and consequence. With just 6 years remaining, current progress falls far short of what is required to meet the SDGs. The report reveals that only 17% of the SDG targets are on track, with nearly half showing minimal or moderate progress, and over 1/3 stalled or regressing. The convergence of multiple global crises has severely hindered progress. The lingering impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, escalating conflicts, geopolitical tensions, and growing climate chaos have severely hindered progress. We must expand on successes to drive accelerated action. We're seeing significant progress in reducing child mortality, HIV prevention, and access to water, sanitation, and energy. We are at a critical moment of choice and consequence. We need bold action for peace, resolving conflicts through dialogue and diplomacy, financial support, reforming the global financial system to support developing countries, implementation surge, investing in critical areas like food, energy, social protection, digital connectivity, and more. We must empower women and girls in all our efforts. This year's Summit of the Future and upcoming conferences in 2025 are our chance to accelerate progress. We must act now and act boldly to rescue the SDGs. The choices we make today will shape our collective future. United, we can overcome any challenge and realize the world we want.
Great, thank you very much for that. Now that we have a little bit of background on the SDG progress report, let's go even deeper with the expertise of our two speakers. Let me just note that while they may not be able to share their PowerPoint presentation with you in its entirety, this video session is being recorded and will be available for you to rewatch on UN Web TV and UN DESA's Facebook page immediately after the session concludes. We're also popping the link to the report itself in the chat box on Zoom and Facebook, so you can check it out for yourself. Now, I am very pleased to introduce our two speakers who will share presentation duties for us this morning. We have Heather Page, senior statistician in the Population Division of UN DESA, and Sokunpanya Yu, an associate statistician from the same team. Welcome, Heather and Sokunpanya. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate it. We're actually in the statistics division, so I just wanted to mention that we're part of the SDG monitoring section of the UN statistics division, not population. So I think that our technicians will, yes, great. Thank you so much for putting on the presentation. So my name is Heather Page. I'm a statistician with the UN Statistics Division, where we are responsible for the global SDG report, as well as we are the secretariat to the Interagency and Expert Group on SDG indicators, which they are a group of statisticians from 28 countries who are really the caretakers of the global indicator framework, which underpins this report. So next slide, please. So we're going to take you on a deep dive, myself and my colleague Panya, to discuss some of the key findings from the SDG report, and also some of the other sections in the report, such as our data story and our progress assessment, to really give you an overview of where we are on SDG progress. So the Sustainable Development Goals report, these are annually produced. This is the only UN official report to monitor progress on the 2030 agenda. And it uses the latest available data and estimates to provide a comprehensive review on that agenda. It reviews all 17 SDG goals, really looking at the progress and in particular the challenges for implementation by countries based on this monitoring framework that I just mentioned. It is prepared by our office in UN DESA, but also this is in collaboration with the entire UN statistical system, consisting of more than 50 international and regional agencies, and based on data from over 200 countries and territories. And each goal has a snapshot of some of the indicators for each of the 17 goals. And I'll get into a little bit more about where you can find not only this information, but even more. Thank you so much for that slide. So essentially, as the video showed you, the world is facing intensifying and interconnected challenges, including the scarring effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, escalating conflicts, geopolitical tensions, and growing climate chaos, which are really hitting SDG progress quite hard. As it noted, the report reveals that only 17% of the SDG targets are currently on track, with nearly half showing minimal or moderate progress, and over 1/3 have stalled progress or even witnessed regression. My colleague Panya, who worked very hard and with a great team on this progress assessment, will dig a little bit more into that progress assessment. Next slide, please. So in the recent launch of the report by the Secretary General at the end of June, he noted that the world is getting a failing grade on the promise of the 2030 agenda. And just looking at the goals under review at the recently concluded HLPF, we see that, for instance, in Goal 1, an additional 23 million people were pushed into extreme poverty in 2022 compared to 2019. Over 100 million more people were suffering from hunger. in 2022 compared to 2019. Fossil fuel subsidies reached a historic high of 1.5 trillion in 2022. The number of forcibly displaced persons rose to 120 million, which is 50% more than 4 years ago and almost double the level of 2015, which is the baseline year for the 2030 agenda. And then for goal 17, also reviewed at the HLPF, developing countries face a $4 trillion annual financing gap to achieve the SDGs. Next slide. Shrinking fiscal space has curbed countries' capacity to address these shortfalls. While ODA or official development assistance has hit another new high of 223.7 billion in 2023, foreign direct investment to developing countries fell by 7%. Debt levels remain unprecedentedly high, and as mentioned, the annual SDG investment gap for developing countries stands at 4 trillion. Next slide. And we're also failing to protect our planet. Despite some reductions in emissions in developed countries, greenhouse gas concentrations hit record highs in 2022 and continue to rise in 2023. We probably know how this is going to go in 2024 as well. Carbon dioxide levels are 150% higher or above pre-industrial levels, and public funding for fossil fuels doubled from 2021 to 2022 and have tripled since 2015. Ocean acidification and species extinction risk are worsening, with a 12% decline in the Red List Index since 1993. Next slide. And violence and armed conflict have become an increasing threat to our sustainable development efforts. Ongoing conflicts and persistent unrest contributed to a record of 120 million forcibly displaced people worldwide by May 2024. And civilian casualties in armed conflicts rose by 72% between 2022 and 2023. These crises highlight the urgent need for international cooperation to address both long-standing and emerging security challenges. Next slide. And if the current trends continue, by 2030, this report card is going to look like this. 590 million people may still live in extreme poverty, and fewer than 3 in 10 countries are expected to have national poverty. 1 in 5 children under age 5 will be affected by stunting. 110% more fossil fuels will be produced than would be consistent with limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. 2 billion people will still live without safely managed drinking water, 3 billion without safely managed sanitation, and 1.4 billion without basic hygiene services. 660 million people will still lack electricity access, and around 1.8 billion will go without clean cooking fuels and technologies. If we don't want this failing report card to be our future, we must accelerate action to redefine the trajectory of SDG progress. Another click, please. Okay. And we can turn things around because SDG progress is actually already happening. I know I've just given you a long list of the things that are not going well, but there are successful examples of SDG progress that need to be accelerated and built upon. For instance, Central and Southern Asia reduced working poverty by 46% between 2015 and 2023. 134 countries have already met the reducing child mortality target, and 7 more were on track in 2022. Gender parity in managerial roles in sub-Saharan Africa has improved 40% since 2000. And global unemployment hit a historic low of 5% in 2023. And the 100 billion annual climate finance commitment to developing countries was met for the first time in 2022. In addition, marine protected area coverage has increased more than tenfold from 2000 to 2024. With accelerated action building on these successes, we can actually reverse our failing grade. One more click. Thank you so much. Next slide. As the video noted, we are truly at a critical moment of choice and consequence, and the urgent priorities could not be clearer. The world needs peace. Resolving conflicts through dialogue and diplomacy is essential. We need action on finance. Developing countries require more financial resources and fiscal space. Reforming the global financial architecture is crucial to unlocking the volume of financing required to spur sustainable development, and advancing the 500 billion stimulus per year is critical to accelerate progress. And we need a surge in implementation. Massive investment and effective partnerships are needed to drive critical transitions in food, energy, social protection, digital connectivity, and more. And the SDGs truly are the best pathway out of our global challenges, and we truly must seize this opportunity. Next slide, please. And so I wanted to stop here just for a second. These are kind of our key findings and our main data points of the report that really focus on where we stand and where we're headed. But the report also includes additional sections that really deep dive a little bit more into the SDG data journey. So my next slide is also on the data story. And this showcases the data story of the SDGs as well as a particular focus. And this year, the focus is on the importance of citizen-generated data. I mean, as we all know, accurate, timely, and disaggregated data are vital for measuring progress toward the SDGs. And despite challenges, considerable progress has been achieved in the availability of internationally comparable data. So the number of indicators included in this global SDG database has increased from 115 indicators in 2016 to 228 in 2024. And the number of data records in the database has increased from 330,000 in 2016 to over 2.9 million as of June 2024. Next slide. And before just kind of delving a bit more into that, I wanted to provide just a slide about how does that data flow actually work for global SDG reporting, and how does this underpin the report that we produce every year. So you have your national statistical system, which has the data ecosystem for SDG monitoring in country, which could also include civil society organizations, private sector, and academia. And they are also working with line ministries and regional organizations to provide data and metadata to the international agencies who are the custodians for the SDG indicators of the framework. And all of this information is then provided to UNSD for the global SDG indicator database, as well as all of the reporting that we're providing to you today. Next slide. Thank you. So, however, SDG progress assessment is really affected by ongoing challenges in the availability and timeliness of data to monitor all 17 goals. While commendable progress has been made, global trend data are available for 51% of the indicators in more than half of all countries. And the variance in country data coverage really plays out differently across the goals. So we do have shortfalls in priority development areas, such as gender equality, climate action, and peace, justice, and strong institutions with goal 16. Next slide, please. And persistent areas of concern include geographic coverage, timeliness, and disaggregation. And when data timeliness is an issue, it really hampers the ability of policymakers to make timely, informed decisions and also course corrections. And we really saw the importance of this during COVID-19. Next slide, please. Countries worldwide are recognizing the need to invest in national statistical systems to produce high quality, timely data for SDG monitoring. In fact, we just spoke with a country 30 minutes ago about how they can improve their SDG monitoring and improve those data flows also between their line ministries and the custodian agencies. But this also involves not only financial resources, but building capacity, modernizing infrastructure, and adopting international statistical standards. And as countries continue to strengthen statistical foundations, embracing innovation and integrating diverse data sources and methodologies will be critical to overcoming challenges such as declining response rates, as well as in fostering collaborative partnerships. Next slide. And the special focus of this data story, which I encourage you to check out, is really on the importance of engaging citizens in data production in order to leave no one behind. Because ensuring that no one is left behind really calls for more than just data disaggregation, which of course is incredibly important. But involving citizens in data production signifies a shift towards a more collaborative and participatory model of governance. And this really marks a new chapter in the social contract between the government and also citizens, and really is at the core of the 2030 agenda. And so to really harness the power of data, the role of national statistical offices as data stewards is evolving, but strengthening partnerships really is going to be key for more inclusive data, building those partnerships with diverse stakeholders to make SDG monitoring more inclusive, to also incorporate different perspectives at different localities, different levels, subnational as well as local, which can also really help to coordinate the efforts for the data ecosystem for SDG monitoring in country to really boost the data and statistical capacity for SDG monitoring. And so I'm going to stop there and pass over to my colleague Panya, who is going to do a bit more of a deep dive on the SDG progress assessment.
Thank you, Heather. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you today, and I'm so glad to see so many of you tuning in from all over the world. So my name is Panya Yu, and I work at the SDG monitoring section of the UN Statistics Division. I'm one of the authors of the SDG Report 2024, and along with my colleague Daniel Aschetti, who's also, I think, joining this call, we were specifically responsible for producing the SDG progress assessment that is included for the first time in the report this year. So I'm going to talk about three quick things during my presentation today. First of all, I'm going to give you a bit of a background on the objective for the SDG progress assessment. Second, I will bring you slightly deeper into the math and the methodology that were used to produce the progress assessment. And finally, I will also show you how the results are shown in the report itself. So to just start from the beginning, and it's already been noted by Heather that the SDG report that we publish annually is widely regarded as the report card for the SDG globally. So I don't believe I need to remind all of you, since a lot of you are probably students tuning in here, that every report card needs some sort of grading criteria. So the SDG assessment that we produce in the SDG report is those grading criteria, right? So there are a number of ways you can measure progress for the SDG. For us at the UN Statistics Division, we have chosen to demonstrate progress through what is called a trend to target measure, which fundamentally answers the question, if the world keeps on at the current trend, how likely are we to meet the 169 SDG targets by 2030? And we answer those questions by assigning one of 5 different trends to each of the 169 targets of the SDG. So those 5 trends are on track or target met, which means that basically by 2030, the targets will be achieved. Moderate progress, which tells you that there has been some progress, but the world still needs acceleration to achieve the target by 2030. Marginal progress basically means there has been very little progress, and there has to be significant acceleration if the targets are to be achieved. Stagnation, which says that there has been very little progress to date, and it's very unlikely that the target can be achieved. And lastly, regression, which has told you that basically the targets have worsened since the baseline, which is 2015. Next slide, please. before we do the progress assessment itself, we had to make some choices. And I just want to show that figure to the right to give you an idea of the information architecture of the Sustainable Development Goals. So there are 17 goals in the 2030 agenda. And those goals are then further divided into 169 targets, which are then divided into 231 indicators, which themselves then go into different data series. And those data series are disaggregated by different dimensions. So the first thing that we need to do before we do the assessment is to decide which data series to include in the assessment. And for us, we use 3 criteria for that selection. First of all, we ask which data series best represent the reference population. So there are data series, for example, that will tell you information about rural area, urban area, and all area. In cases like this, we will choose the data series that basically cover all area. Secondly, we also pay attention to the wording of the data series and make sure that the wording is closest to that of the SDG targets. So the SDG targets are determined in the 2030 agenda, and those are the political commitments that were made by world leaders in 2030. In doing the progress assessment, we want to make sure that those commitments are stuck to as close as possible. And last, we also only select data series that will enable us to make comparisons of progress over time. So to give you an example, certain development data may change simply because the world's population changes over time. In this case, we are very careful to select data series that will basically enable us to make comparisons. For example, data series that are expressed as percentage, or as a proportion of population, or as proportion of 100,000 people, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. So to dive into the bread and butter of the assessment itself, we have 3 steps to produce the progress assessment. Step 1 is to assign a trend to each of the data series that we have selected for the assessment. And basically, in the global indicator framework for the SDGs, there are 2 different types of data series. There are those that have explicit 2030 target values. So when you read the SDGs and you see the mention of the elimination of something or universal access of something, it's relatively straightforward that by 2030, you have to achieve 100% access to it, right? But there are also those data series that don't have these 2030 targets. So we treat, sorry, so just back to the previous slide. We treat these 2 data series differently mathematically. So for those series that have 2030 target values, first we calculate the growth rate between the baseline, which is 2015, and the latest year. Most of the time it's 2023, for example, right? And in the second step, sorry for the typo, the second step, we basically use the CAGR to extrapolate the expected value in 2030. So what this operation does is to assume that if current trends are maintained, what would be the 2030 actual values of those data series? And last but not least, we assign trend to the series depending on how much of the gap between baseline, which is to say 2025 and 2030, will have been closed by 2030 itself, right? So that formula that you see on the left-hand side, it basically just communicates if current trends continue, how much of the distance that have to be traveled will have been closed by 2030. And we assign trends based on that proportion, right? So just to take one example, if 95% of the gap will have been closed by 2030, then we assume that those data series are on track or will be met in 2030. Next slide. Pretty similar principles for data series with no 2030 target values. But in this case, because there are no explicit mention of 2030 goals, we basically assign trends to data series based on how fast of a progress we have seen since 2015. So first step, we just calculate CAGR similar to the previous method. But in the second step, we basically assign the trend values based on how fast the rate of growth or the rate has changed has been since 2015. Next slide, please. So in step 2 and step 3, we basically convert the data series trends into target trends. As I showed you in the graphic a few slides back, each targets of the SDG have multiple indicators, and each multiple indicators have themselves multiple data series in them, right? So the second step is actually to convert the trend that is basically inverts, right? You have trends that say stagnation or regression. Now we need to convert them into numbers, and we plug the trend that is calculated into a linearization algorithm, basically, to turn them from words into a numerical score on a continuous scale from 0 to 5. And once we have those scores for the data series, we aggregate the scores into average score for indicators. And once we have those scores for the indicators, we can then aggregate them into the average score for the target themselves, right? So in this case, we just assume that each data series are equally important for the indicator, and each indicators are then equally important for the target, and we just use simple average to aggregate those scores. And once we have them, we convert the numbers back into words. So if the mean score is between 4 and 5, we assign the trend on track or target met. If it's between 3 and 4, moderate progress, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. So what we end up having is something like this. So for the 169 targets of the SDGs, we are able to give them a color, right, that corresponds to the different trends, right, the 5 trends that I have mentioned already, green being on track or target met, and then red being regression. So this is the results in its kind of unformatted form and unpublished form. But what we are able to do after that is, next slide, please. The actual progress assessment with the trend for each of the 169 targets under the 17 goals. And these are now published as a 2-page spread in the SDG report itself, right? In previous years, we published these progress assessment as a separate online publication, but we thought that having a clear visual representation of how fast the world has come or how slowly is very important. So this year, for the first time, we actually include these results in the glossy report, the SDG report itself, which can be accessed either online, or we also do print copies. The detailed technical notes, which I really invite everyone to check out, is actually published online in the report's website, and could be found in the link that has been shared in the chat. So thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about the technical side of it, and I'm going to pass the floor back to Heather.
Thank you so much, Panya. I do hope and think that this audience is definitely interested in the tech deep dive. So I'm really glad that we were able to also include that in the presentation. I just have a couple more minutes I wanted to spend on a few of the resources that we do have available that are complementary to the report that we hope can also assist you in your data analysis on the SDGs and on SDG monitoring. Next slide, please. So the first thing I'd like to highlight is our SDG extended report. And this is essentially an extension of the glossy report. It's an unedited version of all the inputs we've received from the custodian agencies for all of the indicators. It provides additional context and information since we do have space constraints in the annual report. As I mentioned, each of the goals in the glossy, or we call it the glossy report, in the main report include highlighted indicators, which generally tend to be 5 to 6 to 8 different indicators. But we all know that there are quite a few indicators in the framework, and so this extended report really offers an opportunity to understand the narratives that accompany the data and the data points, as well as the charts. And it's really a great resource to kind of deep dive on the SDG indicators. Currently, we have that in PDF format. Don't be mad, but that's what we have it in so far. But we are looking for ways in the future to try to integrate that as in an even better way for data analysis. Next slide. Of course, we also have the SDG indicator database. This has data for more than 210 SDG indicators for countries across the globe and over 2.9 million data records, as I mentioned. It also includes advanced analytics where you can explore about data availability on the indicators, global and regional trends, as well as trend comparisons across some of the indicators. Next slide. And launched last September, we have the UN Data Commons for the SDGs. So this is a dashboard, or it's actually a site that's powered by Google's Data Commons, and it provides a way to look at SDG progress by goal, by country, area, but it's the engine behind it is a natural language search. So essentially your questions will really lead the way on discovering different data. There's interactive visualizations for data exploration, analysis, and what we hope that it can be used to better inform decision making. And this also integrates the SDG Report 2024 data stories. And we are currently in the process of building this site, integrating more UN agency data as we go. And we would love to hear what you think, in particular as academia and as students, and as those who are data and analytic users, to tell us what you think so that we can improve the site with you in mind. So we have a QR code for that quick survey. We can also provide the link as well. And so on the next slide, I just wanted to provide just a very, thank you so much. This is just kind of a quick demo of our landing page where we put the AI powered search front and center. It's actually already gone by, but where you can put your question in, and it will also lead you to, there's other areas on exploring by country and area. There's also thematic areas where we have data sets and visualizations across 12 different thematic areas is another way to also interact with the data and information. We also have a section on data insights, trying to feature articles and data stories from our partner agencies, showcasing data insights as well as highlights on different topics of interest. And then lastly, well, this is showing you a little bit more of that. And then lastly, we do have our data partners who we are partnering with. The idea for the UN data site is to really integrate the data from all of the UN data partners across the system. Thank you so much. Next slide. And this is my last slide. I just wanted to highlight that we have an ongoing annual collaboration with UN Women for the SDG Gender Snapshot. And this report presents the latest evidence on gender equality across the 17 goals, really calling out the long road ahead to achieve gender equality, but what that really means looking at each of the goals. This is part of a series of short publications where we focus on monitoring progress on selected vulnerable groups. And we have an upcoming launch of the report for 2024 in September. And my last slide, I really invite you to explore the report for more data and analysis on SDG progress. And thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for that, Heather and Sukumpanya. It's a very insightful presentation. And while it might not be the most cheerful news, thank you for doing the important work to gather and analyze the data so that we can measure where we are and where we need to be. But I can see our audience members have a lot of questions for you. So let's get right into it. Some questions have been collected in advance, but remember, you can still submit your questions throughout at slido.com, slido.com/SDGS, and we'd love to hear more from you. And remember to include your name if you would like to. We have some questions on where to get this report. It's available at un.org/DESA, DESA. And we also have posted the links in the Zoom chat and Facebook chat for your reference. So let's move to our first question then. I think it's good to start with a general one to talk about the challenges that we're facing. Anil in India has asked, what is the biggest challenge we are facing in achieving the SDGs? So I don't know if either of you would like to start with that one.
I think I've gone over that quite a bit. So I'd like to have Panya, like if he would like to provide any additional comments. I mean, I know the biggest challenges that we have, as we mentioned, peace and security, funding, and a surge in implementation. But there's other aspects. I'm sorry, I'll pass it to Panya if you'd like to also complement.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, I think that both the video and your presentation covered quite comprehensively what the key challenges are. And to us, basically, these are the fact that, first of all, you cannot have sustainable development without peace and security. And disconcertingly, the report has shown that global conflicts are basically multiplying and hindering progress in that part, right? So certainly that's one of the key challenges, and it's a priority of the Secretary General and of the whole UN system to kind of make sure that peace can prevail and that we can then focus on achieving the SDGs. But yeah, also, it was also mentioned on the funding gap for the SDG itself. It's a few $1 trillion a year for developing countries alone. That's a big number, but certainly it's something that can be done if there's enough political will and enough prioritization on delivering the results of the SDG. Last but not least, certainly lack of international cooperation. The fact that with 6 years to go, the world has to work with each other much more and have to accelerate action on achieving the SDGs. So in that respect, the upcoming Summit for the Future in September will play a very important role in, first of all, not just recommitting to the goals, but also to discuss what have worked and what have not. And as John said, prioritize, right? Learn from basically progress and identify key areas where the return on investment will be greatest, and then just focus on that. There's no substitute for rolling our sleeves up and working very, very hard for the next 6 years if we are to have any chance of achieving the goals by 2030. Back to you, John.
Thank you very much, Heather. Thank you, Sukumpanya. There are two questions here which I think we can group together about youth inclusivity. From Morris in Kenya, who asks what the best use of technology for youth inclusivity is. And also Peggy in Massachusetts in the US, who asks, how do we build technology that supports youth engagement in SDGs at scale? What works and what hasn't, especially with regard, she says, to number 17. I don't know if either of you would like to start off with that question.
Sure. I think the best use for technology for youth inclusivity, I mean, you actually are teaching us, and the digital platforms for civic engagement really have an opportunity here. So social media, online forums, mobile apps, but it's also, there's an opportunity for technology to really include youth through virtual learning and skill development, crowdsourcing and data collection in particular as well, which enables you to participate not only in the data collection, but also in the analysis. Mobile technology is also incredibly promising and useful, not only for oftentimes for financial transactions and connectivity and communication, but also really to help serve rural as well as underserved populations, hard to reach groups. And I think that, you know, data and monitoring and getting the SDG monitoring, you know, mechanism really inclusive involves putting youth, you know, really like showcasing your talents, showcasing where you know that you can use technology, and expanding and pushing that boundary so that you know, policymakers and the ones that are actually making these decisions about their monitoring, the SDG monitoring, and where they're going to put those resources, can really see the benefits of the technology and where youth can actually lead in this area. Panya, I don't know if you'd like to add.
Yeah, just to quickly say that definitely we would really like you to go and explore, for example, what we have done in terms of data, right? The role that youth plays in, first of all, understanding the progress or the lack of it since 2015 is very important, and then use those insights to hold policymakers accountable for the implementation of the 2030 agenda. So from the UN, we do our best to provide the data, for example, through the SDG global database. Go look at the data, play around with it, do your own analysis, make sure that you basically put your own kind of analysis on what we produce, right? And use that as a basis for advocacy and for pushing for change. And use your skills, as Heather mentioned, in new technologies to create new solutions for the communities that you are from. We also at the UN have done a couple of other things, technology related. Go and look for example, the UN Datathon that we do every year and that we try to engage young people and university students on. We provide you with a set of problems to kind of solve. So take part in those initiatives, use your skills on the data sets that we provide and come up with some of those solutions and be a part of bringing the world over the finish line by 2030. Thanks.
Fantastic. I think that's a very appropriate one for our audience today. So thank you both for your comments there. I'm going to take a couple more specific questions now about certain SDGs. There's one here from Miria in Afghanistan who asks, how has the global commitment to gender equality, SDG 5, evolved throughout 2024, and what challenges persist?
So we're currently working on the Gender Snapshot 2024. As I mentioned, it will launch in September. And reviewing the progress on gender equality across all of the 17 goals. I wish I had better news. Sadly, a lot of the SDGs, as we know, and as the progress assessment will show you, is we have regression, we also have stagnation, and we also have things absolutely not heading in the right direction. There are pockets of good examples of where progress has been made, as I mentioned a few of those on some of the gender parity and managerial aspects. But gender equality in general has not progressed at the speed and scale necessary to achieve the SDG 5. And a lot of it, I mean, it's a complex set because you're looking at a lot of different areas. You have financing gaps, you have priorities or gender priorities that are not being mainstreamed into policies or even into development plans and agendas. You know, there's some you know, things that we can do, such as targeting gender financing to different areas. sorry, I really need the report right next to me in order to answer this question. But there are multiple areas that we know where we can focus our efforts. And by doing that, streamlining through the all 17 goals and through, the areas of 6 areas of transition that are also going to be discussed in the SDG Summit. It's really about focusing and making it a priority and prioritizing gender equality across all of the 17 goals so that you can have those knock-on effects to where you can see the progress across the goals that would boost SDG 5. I'm going to also pass to Panya, who is also working on this report with us, in case he has anything to add.
I think you've covered it pretty well, Heather, so nothing else from my end.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Heather. There's an interesting one here which has received a lot of upvotes on Slido, and just an opportunity again to remind you to please keep submitting your questions. Perhaps an opportunity for self-reflection here. We've got a question, an anonymous question, which says, if we are lagging behind in achieving the SDGs, could we say that the goals are more ambitious and lacking the application of foresight in developing these goals? That's I'm not sure if Panya, you want to start with that one?
I'm happy to take on that question. I disagree strongly with the statement that if the goals are too ambitious and we're not on track to achieving them, we should change the goals, or the goals are not well thought out. So personally, I have grown up and lived and worked in 3 different continents, and everywhere I go and meet people and talk to, especially young people like yourself, the priorities that are reflected in these 17 goals come up all the time, right? Young people talk about decent jobs, about just climate transition, about access to clean water and electricity, to gender equality, to quality education. So if you asked me which of these 17 goals we should drop because they are too ambitious, I honestly would not be able to tell you which ones, right? So I think to me, the goals are difficult for a reason, right? If they aren't, we probably wouldn't be talking about them, right? These are ambitious goals because they are important objectives to be achieved. So, anything worthwhile to be achieved really is by nature very difficult. And to me, the fact that halfway to the deadline, we are nowhere near there is not a reason for losing hope, but it should be more of a push to work much harder, right? Simply because if we don't achieve these goals, we're going to live in a world where women are treated differently than men, where hundreds of millions of people will still be suffering from extreme poverty, where climate change become an increasingly kind of real fact of life, and where we have to really deal with a world of heat waves and droughts and floods every day of our life. So this is not a pretty picture. So to me, the goals are very important. The goals are all related to each other. It's really not possible to kind of drop any of them without affecting the whole thing. So I would say the focus should really be on implementing the goals as much as we can. Try to get past the finish line. We still have time, 6 years, right? A lot of these things are not really rocket science, right? With the will and the resources and the technology that we have these days, it's still possible. So I'm still very hopeful that we can basically work together to get to the goals by 2030. Thanks.
I think I would just like to add, we've actually gotten this question before. We actually get this question a lot. And I agree strongly with everything that Panya has said. And, the SDGs are really just a way to package the ambitions that we already have. I mean, all of our countries want to eliminate poverty. We all want our children to be educated with great quality. We want everyone to have access to quality water, sanitation, energy. And we absolutely need goal 13 to be achieved in order for all of this to happen. And so the SDGs really just packaged our already existing aspirations into a wonderful set and a way to actually also bring out a lot of the issues that are incredibly important that often get sidelined. They weren't part of the MDGs, or perhaps, you know, it's only a niche issue for one set of people or vulnerable population or things like that. And it really did bring out a way for us to really focus our efforts, perhaps in many different areas. But as Panya said, they're all interconnected, they're all interrelated, and we actually have to tackle this all at the same time, or else we just won't get there. And where we want to go is actually is the sustainable future we all want.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, both of you, for that. I think it's an interesting point to address, but also it's well worth discussing as well, I think, when we've got both of you on the call. We have a question here about small island developing states, which has come through on Slido. It says SIDS states face challenges in having their needs recognized in terms of meeting SDG requirements. How is their progress in achieving the SDGs being monitored? I know the United Nations had a major SIDS conference earlier this year. So what can you tell us about the unique challenges in gathering data in those countries?
So a lot of times you have, very, very small offices that, okay, so you have a very small office and you have a very large geographical terrain to cover, because a lot of the islands are separated. There, you have multiple islands, you have lots of populations living in lots of different areas, oftentimes very rural conditions. And so for a National Statistical Office to include the SDG monitoring into their already existing monitoring framework, it can be an additional burden. It is recommended, of course, to integrate and mainstream the SDGs as part of already existing development priorities, already existing monitoring frameworks, so that it doesn't increase the burden on countries, but it still does end up doing that. And you see, especially for SIDS, that they face financial constraints. They also face human constraints, just not having enough manpower to be able to carry out all of the monitoring that is necessary, as well as also coordination issues between potentially local and national level monitoring. And so, you're really facing a lot of different issues with limited resources in many cases. So that can definitely hinder that progress. Panya, you also work a bit on this as well, so perhaps you'd like to add.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that the SDGs apply globally, but there are also regional and thematic sustainable development goals frameworks that are being developed for countries and people in different situations, right? John, you mentioned that a few months ago, I think in May, world leaders actually met to discuss the situation of SIDS, and they adopted the Antigua and Barbuda agenda for small island developing states. So these kind of indicators and targets that will apply to SIDS are complements to the global indicator framework. So on this question, I would say, in addition to paying attention to the global indicator framework for the SDGs itself, also have your voice heard, right, in the development of these special thematic frameworks for your country, right? And basically use those frameworks to act as a rationale, right, for seeking the kind of capacity building and support that your countries need. And your needs are very different from other countries as well. So paying attention to those complementary frameworks would be very important in making sure that no one is left behind in the whole implementation of the SDGs. Back to you, John.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's important, obviously, to recognize the differences between states in terms of implementation as well. We have a question here before we move on to a few statistical questions about how data is gathered and analyzed. Kevin in Nairobi, Kenya asks, can you talk about the concept of just transition in relation to Agenda 2030 for sustainable development?
So yes, so this term really refers to the need to ensure that the transition to a low carbon sustainable economy is fair and inclusive, leaving no one behind, which we know is a key principle of the 2030 agenda. And this really, means we've got to integrate social justice into environmental policies. We also have to address the issues of climate change, but that promote inclusive growth, actually also address poverty eradication, as well as the well-being of people, and particularly the most vulnerable. I mean, it's certainly a tricky undertaking, and as far as like all of the different aspects that are needed for a just transition, but it's absolutely imperative. I mean, we cannot achieve sustainable development unless we're also climate resilient, and we need a just transition, for economic opportunities as well as respect for different populations and the environment.
Excellent, thank you very much. Just before we move on to those two more statistical questions that I mentioned earlier, one that maybe would be good for Sukh and Panya to come in on, again, about SID states. It's an anonymous question, which has just appeared on Slido, which says, can we really ensure that the progress reflected in SDG reports accurately reflects development in the SIDs when so many indicators lack sufficient data?
I think that's a very important question, and it's a fair point. Data availability for the SDG has improved drastically since 2015, but that's not to say that the data gap has been completely filled. So certainly, to be able to give a fair progress assessment on countries such as those who are small island developing states, first of all, the data have to be available, and secondly, they have to be analyzed for those specific set of countries, in addition to the global assessment that we are doing. So in answering this question, I would say that we at the UN Statistics Division, the SDG monitoring section in particular, we do global assessment of the SDG, right? However, there are other UN agencies and regional commissions who have special kind of editions of their own progress assessment that will cover people in their regions, but also that will cover people in special development stages such as SIDS. So while I cannot say that I am aware of all the progress assessment that have been done by the UN system, I would highly encourage anyone who are interested in the progress for a specific subset of countries to go and Google and try to find those specialized publications by UN agencies and by UN regional commissions that will cover those countries. The UN does have an office for High Representative for LDC, LLDCs, and SIDS, and I suspect that if you go to their website, they may actually have SDG progress assessment for those particular countries as well. So definitely don't only look at the publication, go and refer to a lot of those specialized publications as well. Thanks, John.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Panya. I'd like to move on to this one again now from Stefan in Canada. It's a statistical question, which says, how can citizen data be integrated into global SDG reporting? And the follow-up there is, how can the Copenhagen framework on citizen data help in this regard?
So we see the opportunity for citizen data to become integrated into global SDG reporting. This is actually already taking place. We've seen some examples from countries such as Ghana, who has integrated citizen data on marine litter for one of their SDG monitoring indicators, as well as we see that there's a lot of potential for citizen data to come in where there's no official monitoring. Kenya has also integrated some citizen-generated data into their last VNR. They Kenya actually developed a quality framework for the integration of citizen data and its use as an official statistic, and was able to include 2 indicators in its last VNR. So we do anticipate that they will be able to expand on that as part of the overall SDG monitoring in the country. And really, the other aspect of citizen-generated data is the leaving no one behind dimension. And we really see that citizen data is a powerful way to reflect the situation of marginalized population groups. I mean, not all countries will be able to integrate citizen data. A lot of it depends on quality processes and things like that. But we do, as this comment mentioned, we have the collaborative on citizen data, and this is really aimed to really strengthen the partnership between civil society organizations and national statistical offices in order to try to really expand on that and help make that happen. And the framework is really there to support the partnerships and also bringing in good practices from countries as well as from citizens and stakeholders.
Perfect. Would you like to say anything on that, Panya, or are you happy for us to move on to probably the last question?
We can move to the last question, John.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm afraid we don't have too much more time, but I think this is a good one to end on, considering we have an audience today of students, researchers, and academics. It's from Anielka in Nicaragua, who asks, how can knowledge of the SDGs be better integrated into educational programs to empower young people to become agents of change?
Do you want me to start, Panya, or do you want to go?
Go ahead, Heather. I can add.
Okay, so I mean, I actually see a lot of different ways for youth and academia and students to kind of not only integrate SDG analysis and data into kind of what they're doing, but also really trying to bridge between research and data analysis by youth with policymakers to really try to bring a youth perspective. I mean, we hope that this report is, the underlying data, the aim for this report is really to serve as a foundational resource with the latest data and evidence for developing recommendations and solutions to really advance progress towards the SDGs, in particular led by youth. And we see this, potentially through partnerships by youth-led research initiatives, having collaborative platforms with young researchers, not only young researchers, policymakers, and stakeholders, also through policy advocacy and youth participation in policy development. I mean, this is what we'd really like to see. Participation in the policy development is even a challenge for a typical national statistical system, trying to really create that feedback loop between the data analysis and the policy implementation, and then also the impacts of that policy, and then making that full loop again and again to really influence and inform policy. And we really see that there's an opportunity for a strong partnership between academia, NGOs, as well as government agencies. For instance, on the Collaborative for Citizen Data, we work with a cohort of academia who are also engaged with governments as well as the UN to really try to advance their research forward and really bring those perspectives, because you are the ones who are closest to the ground. You are the ones who are closest to the perspectives of youth and students, and it's your future that we're talking about. And so you absolutely have a right to be at the table and to provide influence on the type of research that you would like to see moving forward, and in particular for SDG implementation, because the ambition of this agenda is for you. I'll stop there.
Just a couple of very quick additions. I want to echo Heather's call to have agency among all the young people in SDG education, right? So the first thing I want to say is, if your schools or universities are not incorporating SDG into the curriculum, ask for it. It has to be demand driven. But more importantly, secondly, if your schools are interested and if your classes are interested, the United Nations has actually developed a whole suite of SDG academic materials that you could find, including curriculums, book clubs, reading suggestions, online learnings, and things like that. Perhaps somebody can put the link to that on the chat, but if you just go and Google UN SDG academic resources or something like that, it's going to be one of the first results you will see. Back to you, John.
Thank you very much, both of you. I think that was a really nice way to end. So unfortunately, we are out of time. We're going to have to leave our conversation there for today. But many thanks to you, Heather, and to you, Sok and Panya, for sharing your research with us. And thanks to you, our audience, as well, for your participation. I certainly learned a lot listening to our speakers, and I hope you did too. If you're watching on Zoom, you'll see an exit survey pop up when you leave the meeting. Please do fill it out. We would really appreciate your feedback, as it helps us to plan for future events for you. Of course, you can read the key messages from this year's SDG Progress Report and explore the data by going to un.org/DESA, DESA. We are also putting the direct link to the report in the chat here. Don't forget that the UN Summit of the Future will take place on the 22nd and 23rd of September, alongside the UN General Assembly High Level Week. You can expect that world leaders will be discussing SDG progress that week, of course. Finally, thanks once again to our speakers and to you for tuning in, and thanks to our colleagues at UN DESA and UN Academic Input for coordinating this series. Have a wonderful rest of your day or night, depending on where you are in the world, and that's goodbye from me and the team based at the UN headquarters in New York. Thank you.